So today is a very special day. I'm super excited to have this very important conversation with Amy Kowalchyk. Thank you so much, Amy, for joining. I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
I can't wait to hear what I have to say too. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, well, a lot of times in these interviews, a lot of times I've interviewed some of the most prolific female leaders here in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and across the country, similar to yourself. And a lot of times others realize how amazing they are, and sometimes it's really helpful to verbalize. It might be a reminder of just all of the amazing things that you have accomplished. So I'm excited to talk about it. So, before we jump in and talk about the very important topic of empowering women in technology, because we talked about before we went live how the numbers are kind of going backwards instead of forwards. So, this is a really important conversation. But before we do that, I would love to understand how did you, get to where you are, get to be a, VP as a woman in technology, and why was it really important to you? Was there someone or something that inspired you early on?
So, I've always been extremely competitive. So, if you put a competitive situation in front of me, then it's usually game on. And I kind of go back to when I was in ninth grade, back in the old days in the 80s, when junior high was seventh through ninth. So, no, it wasn't middle school, it was junior high. And then high school was 10 through 12. And back in the old days, UIL rules were that if you attended a sporting camp that summer before your high school year, then you couldn't play that sport on the varsity. And one of my ninth grade friends, Margot, said to me, "Are you going to go to basketball camp this summer?" And I said, "I am not. I'm going to play varsity my sophomore year in high school." And she laughed at me and said, "There is no way you're playing varsity." And that just sparked a little bit of, "Oh, really?" So I set a small goal, and that was to work all summer and improve my skills and to be prepared for high school. And every time you overcome a challenge and you make progress, you get another obstacle. And that next obstacle was first week of basketball practice. There were four things that I had to do in order to not get cut from the team on Friday. And I worked diligently for 3 days to get that done. And well, let's just fast forward to the fact I made varsity as a sophomore. My next goal after that was to play collegiate basketball, which I did. So I attribute a lot of success that I've had to persistence, making small goals along the way. I mean, you can have a really big dream, and that's perfectly fine. But how are you going to get there? What are those small little things that you want to take away and choose as your success nuggets that keep you motivated? Because if you set too big of a goal and you don't have a path to that goal, then you get discouraged. So I think it's important to set those smaller goals. They're like stepping stones to your big dream.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I can back you up with even the research. And, you've done research on yourself to see that to be true. But in, the last 3 decades of applied sports psychology research, which is, my world, and working with, Olympians and some amazing female leaders, that you are correct 100%. And so I want to really spotlight what you said, is that if there's anyone listening, and it could happen any level. So you could be your first couple years in, be manager, director, or possibly even, VP and above. But we talked before we went online that in any next level of success comes a little bit of, fear and doubt, but thinking through and getting really clear on what it is that you want, why it's so important to you, and then stepping back and thinking, what is the next best step?
And also incorporating somebody to sponsor you, to help you, to guide you, because I don't know all there is to know. I'm an old dog, but I'm absolutely open to new tricks. So in these processes, I call on peers, I call on subordinates, I call on mentors, just to get different perspectives, because I think it's super important to make sure that you don't get trapped inside your own head.
Yes, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because not to throw us women under the bus, but sometimes, just sometimes that happens because we're so invested in doing a good job, and sometimes we get overlooked or possibly disregarded because our male counterparts are a little bit more vocal about their accomplishments, what they want, what their how productive they've been, and even about throwing a big dream or aspiration out there, like, oh, in 10 years I'm going to own this place, or 10 years I'm going to. And so and so I really believe 100% what you said is that as women, it's really important to be more vocal, to own, our value, and also to have other people really support us. And along that topic, do you think that it's important to make big asks? In other words, not just wait around for your support circle, or to wait around for a sponsor or a mentor, but think about, this is where I want to go. This is who would be most important for me to get there. And then figuring out a plan to make a big ask and being really proactive.
Sometimes it's hard for women to ask for help, and I don't understand that. Well, I do, but I don't. Men won't stop and ask for directions, and we make fun of them for that. But we won't ask for help, and it takes a village. It doesn't matter if it's personal, if it's professional, if it's your family. I've got two kids. They both play two sports apiece, and I have to ask for help sometimes. I know you've never seen me or Wonder Woman in the same room together, but that doesn't mean I can do it all. So I have to enlist help, and I have to ask, and I have to be forward about it, because if, nobody can read my mind, thank goodness. But if we don't put it forward and we don't vocalize it and we don't bring it to alarm or to alert, then nobody's going to know. So how is anybody going to be able to know that you want to go for a promotion, or that you want to understand a different part of the business, or you want to gain insight into processes because you've got an interest in a different department in the organization? So there's all kinds of things that we can do to ask for help, vocalize our desires, and why we want to do what we want to do. I think that's another important part of gaining that sponsorship, is the why. This is what I want to do, but this is why. I have to tell my kids that all the time. I'm like, do this, but this is why. And then they get it. So put it in that form, right? And then that way you get the buy-in from the individual who understands your goal, where you're coming from, and why you want to go there.
Yeah, and so I'm glad that you have your kids in training at a very young age. I'm sure you wish that you were doing that at their age. So that's super valuable advice. And if you are going to make a big ask, to have that thought through, because if you're going to get the opportunity to have that conversation, you want to make sure that you're well prepared.
Absolutely.
And so, that being said, what has, we talk about mindset because that's, a commonality between what you do and, of course, what I do in my coaching. So, as a woman in technology, what mindset has been really important for you to get to where you are today?
I believe that there is always a way. Put something in front of me, and it might be the hardest puzzle. It might be the most convoluted situation, but there's always a way to figure it out. You might have to unravel the ball of yarn piece by piece. It might not be easy. It might not be straightforward. It might be uncomfortable. You might have to ask for help. You might have to engage a team, but there's always a way to get something done. And it might not be to what you think the outcome should be, but it could result in movement and mobility for either another project or another person. But I completely believe that there is always a way to get something done. So you've got to prioritize, you've got to delegate, you've got to align with other teams, and then you've got to ask for help.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a common thread in the ask for help. And so if things maybe start to feel overwhelming and complicated, then that trigger, rather than being panic, should be to take a pause, is what I'm hearing, thinking about what's the next best step and maybe who can help.
I love being presented to a challenge just because it makes me think outside the box. Things that are hard, things that are easy, everybody can do those. Things that are hard, it takes a special person to get those done. So I like to attribute to think there's always a way, but you might have to make a zigzag to get it done as opposed to a straight line.
Yeah, and I also want to highlight what you said, because I think what's really important is the belief that there's a solution. And I think that's really the most important first step.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And some people will call you crazy because they might not see what you're seeing. And vice versa. There will be something that happens and I'm like, there's no possible way. And they're like, well, I'm thinking about this. And then they start to work through it. And I'm like, okay, tell me more. What else? Now I'm getting it. So paint me a picture. I'm much better with pictures. So if you draw me a picture with crayons, I'm much better with it. But yes, paint me that picture.
Make it fun. A little bit of levity doesn't hurt either.
Amen. If we're not having fun, then don't do it. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, that is that. Write that down. I would definitely write that down if you're listening.
Life is too short.
So if you were going to give some advice to your younger self, maybe when you were first entering the workforce self, or your first couple years in self, what advice would that be?
It's easy. Invest in myself. I wish that when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, that I would have had the wherewithal to get a mentor, to hire a professional coach, someone who could guide me, give me outside experience and knowledge, and to challenge my thought process. I don't think that it's too late for some of us older dogs to get involved with a professional coach. I've got one today that I've been working with for, gosh, almost 2 decades, and she is insightful. She challenges me. She makes me think outside the box. She gets me uncomfortable a lot, and that's helped me to grow. I wish I would have known somebody like that when I was younger, just to see what that would have looked like. But hey, it's never too late. I absolutely, positively say invest in yourself because nobody else is going to do it for you.
Yes, exactly. So what do you think is a good way for people to get started doing that? Because maybe they're not going to, their company might not sponsor an executive coach or even a group program, or what would you suggest? Or, I'm glad to add to that too, but being on the other side, in the corporate environment, what would be a good way for an emerging female leader to do that?
I think it starts with your network, your friends, your colleagues, even some of those individuals in your own organization. Some companies will contribute to a portion of investment back into your career, which I think is important. And those companies who don't, then it's on you to negotiate with maybe a mentor or a professional coach to try to get started in some form or fashion. It can be overwhelming to see what the cost associated with a mentorship or a stewardship or hiring a professional coach could be, but I will tell you it is worth every penny. There are tools that are brought forward. There's ideas. There's strategy that you probably don't think about. But I also, if there's a way to get scholarships, hey, I'm in the fundraising business as well. I do a big fundraiser every year. Just maybe do a fundraiser for your own self. You could do a bake sale. I don't know, get creative. But it really is about thinking outside of the box and being creative and figuring out a way to invest in yourself. It's important.
Yeah, well, of course, I agree 100%. And a lot of times, too, it's not just one-on-one coaching. I can share there are, monthly, there's group programs, there's a lot of different levels and different situations. So if anyone's interested in that, not necessarily just for my programs, but just for some advice in general on what could be available, I'm glad to share that. And yeah, so early on, that can be super helpful. I agree 100%. And so when it comes to empowering women in tech, what are a couple things that are instrumental? Because we were also talking a little bit offline about how really based on the McKinsey report and some of the other data that's coming out, is that the female leaders in tech it's going the wrong way. And so, can you share some insight on how we can empower more female leaders in tech so we can see that really shift in the right direction?
Yeah, I think I heard a statistic today that said that the workforce is becoming more equal, men and women, but in the executive suite, it's 10% women and 90% other male. So I don't know if it's fear or the good old boys club. There are emerging companies out there today who have a very open policy about diversity and inclusivity. So I suggest finding your path, understanding where you want to be, and then map that to any of the companies that might have that same criteria match for an executive. And it's not necessarily about men versus women or culturally speaking, it's about capabilities. And we are just as capable as anybody else on the planet. So there are a couple of things that I think initially. Number one, you've got to have confidence in yourself, be visible, be prepared. Women, we tend to be, and I'm not going to lump all of us into the same scenario. We tend to be touchy feely. We're all the feels. We need to be more data driven and have our facts straight to make sure that we've got our alignment and our facts forward. And we use action words. Let's use action words more so than passive verbs. And take a seat at the table. I have to tell you a quick little story about a session that I attended at one of the Women in the Channel events. And this woman was talking about taking a seat at the table. And she said, so what you do when you walk into a meeting, all the women, we tend to go to the back of the room or sit on the wall or find a chair that's kind of way over there, whatever the case may be. And she said, have someone put your stuff in the room for you. And then make sure and I'm like, well, that would be me. So I just put my stuff in my room for me because I don't have that person. And then she said, and then wait for everybody to be in there. And then you walk into the room and you stand in the doorway as tall and as, with your frame held firm. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then you walk in and you take your seat right in the middle or right at the end. And you don't become that flower on the wall. You are actively engaged. You've got a primetime seat. You can see everybody. They can see you. They can hear you. Take your seat at the table. Don't put baby in the corner.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100% because that starts with getting, well, let me roll back a little. We are really up against a couple 100 years of cultural indoctrinations that get in the way of us naturally being able to do that because, historically, women are the ones that support their husbands and we're the ones that, don't, if you speak up, you're bragging, and it's just, it's challenging. It's going to take practice. And so for anyone listening, you might want to think about doing this in a safe environment first, like whether it's with your family or with your peers or with your subordinates or what have you, and working up to this. But that is 100%. And it really starts with sending that non-verbal message first. So you
don't need dramatic music. Let's leave the dramatic music out of it.
Yeah, no dramatic music needed. Yeah, but start practicing it. Like I said, some of the speaking events that I've been on recently, creating pods, in other words, to practice in a safe environment, verbalizing, like you said, data driven, facts are really important, but sharing, like speaking about, what we've accomplished, how productive we've been, what we're proud about, what we love, what our passions are, and just getting a little more used to talking about ourselves and then branching that out. I think that's important 100%.
I also, this is interesting. I played collegiate sports. I love watching sports on TV. So I'm kind of a guy's girl, but not everybody is there. And I use guys, I should say men. Men sometimes don't know how to engage with women because they want to talk about the game and the throw and the tackle and the slam or whatever the case may be. But if we as women open up and lean in and engage in conversation with those male counterparts to learn more about them, asking questions, drawing them in to see where there's a commonality, it will make it a lot easier for them, because I think they've got a little bit of a fear of, gosh, I don't want her to think that I'm coming on to her. I don't want her to think that I'm interrogating her. I just don't know how to engage with her. So if we engage in tell me about you. What do you like? What'd you do this weekend? Do you have kids? And just have that simple conversation. People love to talk about themselves. And if open that door to have that conversation, to find some sort of commonality, more times than not, you're going to start to build that relationship and build that trust with that male counterpart that maybe he was afraid to knock on that door.
Yeah, definitely. Just being very strategic and proactive for sure. So, for everyone listening, is there a call to action, or what if, obviously this has been full of gold nuggets of wisdom, but what's the one thing that you can offer everyone to think, as a female leader in tech or an emerging leader in tech, what's a key takeaway that we can start doing now or practicing or read, or what would you advise?
I listen to audibles, and I've got several books that have been really helpful. Atomic Habits has been great because it's about making change, but it's about making change in small increments. So highly recommend it. Highly recommend that one. The other thing is, again, be visible, have your data, have your facts, be cognizant of what you're trying to accomplish, and back into that with your strategy. And the final thing that I will say, and we've talked about this a bit, but invest in yourself. Put yourself first. It's okay to toot your own horn, quite honestly. A very smart woman told me yesterday, she said, you need to be kind to yourself. You need to stop judging yourself. You need to stop doubting yourself. You need to have a better internal talk track. And it's, be kind. I'm good. I can do this. We are filled with doubts day in and day out about, I don't know if I can get this done. I don't know if I can do it. But the truth of the matter is that when push comes to shove, we'll get it done. So just be good to yourself and take care of you.
I think that couldn't be better advice. As far as Atomic Habits, I agree 100%. And it's the small, tiny things that you do day in and day out. And one thing, just since you did bring up that book, it talks a little bit about making good habits very easy, almost impossible not to do, and making bad habits almost impossible. So in other words, if you're trying to shed a few pounds, then maybe get the junk food out. But it's the same thing if you're trying to have movement or you're trying to do anything. So that book is a gold mine, 100%. And self-care and taking care of ourselves, I couldn't agree more. Now, Amy, I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom. Congratulations on all of your recent success, and I look forward to continuing to follow you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Hey, reach out to anybody out there who wants to chat some more. Would love to network and connect. Appreciate you having me, Cheryl. Thank you so much.
Of course.